We're jumping back in the time machine on this one. Specifically, we are going back to episode 19 of The Edward Show. Why? Because a friend asked me recently for an episode of my podcast to listen to, and she's not a nerdy, super nerdy marketer like all of us are. So I wanted to give her something a little bit less nerdy. I found a podcast. It was episode number 19, and it was me talking about Caleb Simpson's story. Caleb Simpson is a guy who goes up to people and asks them how much their apartment costs and if he can get an apartment tour. He's gone super viral doing it, and I tell the story of how he got started, how he found his audience. And I re-listened to that podcast before sending it to my friend, and I said, wow, this is darn good, and it's an early episode, and I bet not many of the listeners now have heard this one. So I wanted to share it again because I thought it was so good, and because there's a lot of lessons. What lessons? Here are the lessons from this episode which are worthwhile. Number one is consistency. I talk about consistency all the time in the show. It took Caleb Simpson a lot of tries and a lot of time to find an audience, and he didn't give up. It took him a lot of time to find what he was doing, and he didn't give up. And so you'll hear about that, and he made it. And lesson number two, stealing ideas. I always encourage stealing ideas. If you see something you like, don't be afraid to do it too, or to try it too, to put it into your app. If it's good enough for Mark Zuckerberg, it's good enough for you. Mark Zuckerberg takes a lot of features from other software companies that are doing the features well. Mark Zuckerberg says, I like that. Let's put it in. I like this. Let's put it in. And so if Zuck can do it, you can do it too. It's happened to me. Happened to one of my companies. Another company copied our copy. They copied our copywriting. They copied our CSS exactly. Everything was basically a carbon copy. And they launched, they were very successful, and they were able to use this launch to raise $2 million from Coinbase Ventures. So it'll happen. People will do it. They will win by doing it. Winners do this. If Mark Zuckerberg can do this, you can do it too. And Caleb Simpson does this as well. And then number three, the lesson, Caleb Simpson had to learn to not depend on people and to depend on himself. And in some instances, you have co-founders who can deliver. But at the end of the day, there's one person that you can trust, and that is yourself. And for Caleb Simpson, that was himself, and he went it alone. So if you're frustrated with the other people in your life, don't be afraid to do something all on your own. But you got to be consistent. You got to stick with it. So those are the lessons you will get from this episode. And while we listen, I'm going to be here listening too. So you're going to see me. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter, on X, you'll see me listening right along, playing it on headphones while I work. Let's go. This guy, Caleb Simpson, has the craziest story. He's the guy who makes the videos where he goes up to people and asks them how much rent is, how much they pay for rent, and then shows their home. He's that guy. And he's really famous now, but it took him a while to get here. He really went through some hardships. It was hard. It was hard. And most people would not persist the amount that he did. And he was humble in getting here, and also very hardworking. So I did a deep dive on him yesterday, and I'm going to share his story. This is episode number 19 of The Edward Show. This is my daily podcast where I talk about everything that I'm learning, everything that I'm doing, things that I love with getting go-to-market and getting customers and getting users, any cool stories that I'd like to share. And today that story is Caleb Simpson, the guy who goes, how much do you pay for rent? Can I see your home? Can I see your apartment? Caleb comes from a wildly big family. He's the middle child of 9. He has 2 younger brothers, 2 younger sisters, 2 older brothers, and 2 older sisters. That's a lot of siblings. A lot of siblings. When he went to college, he was a total underachiever. He didn't like school. His early identity was just partying, and he wanted to be in New York City. And he got lucky. He was invited. I wouldn't even say this was lucky, because it's very clear that Caleb made his own luck. He was very outgoing with asking for things in order to achieve his goals, in order to get to where he wanted to be. But it took him a while, I think, to define his goals. But he realized he wanted to be in New York, and he got invited to work at a tennis club in New York City. Kind of funny. He didn't know anything, and he showed up to the interview in a suit. He showed up to the interview to work at this tennis club. And you think he was an instructor and doing odd jobs in the tennis club. And he showed up in a suit. And he ended up working there for years, making only $12,000 a year, which is not a lot in New York City, sleeping on a mattress in a living room paying $600 a month. And that was his life. That was his life for many years. He was thinking that he wanted to maybe work in an office, and he was interviewed by a recruiter because he was thinking about going to a recruitment firm to work as a recruiter himself. So this recruiter was interviewing him to see if he really had what it takes to be a recruiter. And the recruiter was like, Caleb, listen, I work 8 to 12 hours a day, maybe more. It is a grind. It is soul crushing, Caleb. Do you really want to do this? And Caleb said, no. You know what? No, I don't want to do this. And he ended up saying, he said, F corporate America. I'm going to start learning how to use a camera. He was interested in making films. He said, I'm going to make films. And so he turned down corporate America. He realized that wasn't what he wanted. He was still constantly living paycheck to paycheck. And then he turned this down because it just wasn't interesting to him. So he learns cameras because he likes them. And this is something that I really appreciated in his story is with whatever he was doing, he was actively seeking out mentors. And one of his early mentors, he met this woman, an early mentor, and they spent time together. And she said to him, talk to me in a year after you've actually made some stuff, because he was very inexperienced. She didn't know if he was going to continue putting in the time and the work that it takes to learn how to make videos, to learn how to make films, to learn how to use cameras and various pieces of production equipment. She didn't know if he was going to do that. As somebody myself who's made a lot of films, a lot of videos, it's a lot of work. It's difficult. It's a lot of work. And so she didn't know if he was going to stick with it. I actually think I said in an earlier episode that I met FouseyTube at a few conferences. In fact, I feel like our paths, Caleb, if you're listening, I feel like our paths actually crossed back in the day. So anyway, he goes, I'm going to take this advice to heart. And he makes a lot of films, a lot of videos. And he's also really active in trying to find gigs so he could get money doing what he likes, which is making videos. And this guy, Caleb, he's scouring Craigslist for years and he's doing back and forth gigs. His first gig invites him to Dubai. He's never been out of the country. And now his first gig making videos, he's being taken to Dubai. And he has to get a new camera. He was using a 7D before this. So he gets a new camera, a Sony camera, not a Canon. And he's using equipment that he doesn't know anything about. And it's his first time out of the country. So most people, when it's their first time out of the country and they go somewhere foreign like Dubai, most people will explore. And Caleb was very serious about doing good work. And so he stays in his hotel room watching YouTube videos, learning the equipment that he didn't know how to use. And he made some videos that both parties agreed were pretty good. But this relationship only lasted 3 months. There were some differences between Caleb and the client. And Caleb goes back on Craigslist. He's still broke, still living paycheck to paycheck. He gets odd jobs here and there. He got a big contract after another year for $50,000 a year. He was hyped about this, and he did it for the year. He got the $50K, but he didn't get renewed. So he goes back to Craigslist. And honestly, throughout all of this, finding work for him was really hard. If you're a freelance filmmaker, or if you've ever tried it, you know it's not easy. I went to film school. I have so many friends who are doing this and they're struggling and it's difficult for them. So scouring Craigslist, looking for gigs, trying to support yourself, doing this because you're so passionate about it. It's not easy, but the passion and the consistency and the belief in the process carries you through. And that's what Caleb was doing. And at some point, he was so poor, he was so broke that he could only afford cup of noodles to eat. He didn't have anything to eat except cup of noodles. He really was out here starving, even though he was getting these jobs, these gigs here and there. So he goes and he finds some influencer as TikTok is blowing up. Says, I'm going to work for you for free. And they start making videos together. And something that I appreciate in his story is he says he likes stealing. What do I mean by that? Not going and shoplifting, but stealing ideas, just jacking ideas from one platform or for one creator and doing it for himself or doing it on another platform. So he would take trends from YouTube and make them for TikTok and they would do well. And he would take trends from TikTok and make them for YouTube and vice versa. And he didn't care if it was creative or not. He just cared about performance. And he started doing pretty well with his videos. And so he got a much bigger gig, this time doing marketing and videos for an NFT company. Now he's getting paid $80,000 a year, and he does that for a year. The gig ends a year or so, and the gig ends in 2022. And Caleb has an epiphany at this point. He's been for, I think, like 5 years now. He's been doing these jobs here and there, scouring Craigslist, going from having nothing to having something to having nothing again to having something again to making other people go viral. And he says to himself, he says, well, I keep making other entities, other companies, and other people go viral. Why don't I do it for myself? And so he goes back to this trend of getting mentors, of asking for advice, of being shameless in asking for advice. And he calls all the creators he knows. And he knows a lot because he's been networking in New York City as a videographer and as a producer, or as a videographer, and an editor for the last 5 years working in New York. So he knows a lot of creators and he gets a lot of advice. And the best piece of advice that he gets is to make what he wants to see. It's to make the videos that he wishes he was seeing on whatever platform he chooses. And he had been telling this other guy to make a series about how much rent is and what the corresponding homes look like. And this other guy didn't do it. Caleb still thought this was a cool idea. So he said, I will do this. This is what I want to see. I will do this. And then he said, I'm going to commit to getting at least one apartment showing on day one. I'm going to do this first day. I'm going to go out all day. I'm going to ask people, how much do you pay for rent? Can I see your apartment? I am going to get an apartment showing on day one. He hired a friend to help him with this. They go out. He asks so many people. Some people say, yeah, another day, but he said, I'm doing it today. And most people just say no. And so here's what he did. A lot of people would have given up. Here's what he did. He staged it. He used somebody he knew at the end of the day when everyone has said no. He just used somebody he knew. And he puts that video up and it does well immediately. It gets 100,000 views. And all the people who said no to him were messaging him to ask if they could do it now. LOL. I love this. All the people who said no to him, they see this video and they're like, hey, this is a cool concept. I shouldn't have said no. Can we do it? And he goes hard making videos every day. He sees this idea has traction and he goes hard making videos each day. And eventually, Barbara Corcoran of the Corcoran Group, I think that's the name, reaches out for him to make a video about her home. And this video goes super viral. And now Caleb Simpson is like one of the hottest entities on the internet. And one of his many mentors tells him, brands, he has brands who want to work with him. And he's like, well, how do I work with these brands? How much do I charge? And one of his many mentors tells him that brands are getting $120,000 to spend on influencers. And sometimes they can be persuaded to spend it all on one influencer. And he's told the story of this comedian. I think the comedian's on TikTok, and the comedian gets the full $120K to make a video on TikTok, and the video doesn't even perform well. And he got the full $120K. Most of the time, these brands with these budgets, they spread it over several influencers. Could be around 6 or so. And Caleb said, no, I'm the hottest thing on the internet right now. If I'm ever going to ask for $120K for a video, it's going to be now. And he says this to his manager, why aren't you trying to get this money? And his manager says, that's not how it works. And they have this argument. He says, I am the hottest thing. Now is the time. His manager says, that's not how it works. And so he believes in himself. He believes in what he's hearing. And he fires the manager, has a replacement lined up, gets a new manager who's ambitious like him. And you know what happens? You can guess what happens. They get the $120K. They're getting great brand deals. And he's making great videos. And his videos are doing really well. Here's a really crazy thing, though. It sounds like, it's all good at this point. Like now he did it. He trudged through the poop and he's made it here. During this time, while he was waiting for the brand deal money to come in, even after it was signed, he was still completely broke. He was out of money. He was hyper famous, completely out of money, completely broke because the way that these deals work is the money comes in later. And he had to call his brother and ask for help. He wasn't afraid to ask for help. And his brother gave him $10,000 to see him through these months while he waited for the deal money to come in. And of course, he paid the brother back. Now he shoots these videos everywhere with some of the biggest people in the world. He shoots these videos all over the world in a lot of different countries with super famous people and people you haven't heard of, with homes that are tens of thousands of dollars a month or homes that are hundreds of dollars a month. And he has his own nice place and he can afford a lot more than cup of noodles now. And I love this story. It's such a great and inspiring story because this guy hustled, this guy persisted, he didn't give up. So I want to talk about the lessons that I got from Caleb Simpson's story, because there are some great lessons in this. I talk about being afraid to steal on a different episode. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, he stole stories from Snapchat, brought that to IG. He stole Reels from TikTok, brought that to IG. He stole threads from Twitter. He's shameless and it works. And stories and Reels have been very successful in IG. And he's shameless. And I think it's a lot harder to invent something completely new than it is to just take a good idea and repurpose it in some way. And Caleb, he wasn't afraid to steal ideas when TikTok was getting popular. He just recognized that it was an easier path to success. He wasn't successful and he wanted to be successful. He wanted to be able to have like a nice apartment, not pay $600 a month and be able to eat more than a cup of noodles. And so he stole ideas. He took ideas. And I think a lot of ideas are just derivative of each other anyway. I mean, his series is basically a different take on MTV Cribs. And I think, so what? I honestly believe, like, so what? It's so much easier to be successful just taking a good idea and repurposing it. Another lesson from Caleb Simpson's story, consistency. He didn't give up on his passion, which was making videos. He stuck with it until he figured something out that worked, and he had the connections to help him pop off the idea. He had the mentors and the people to shoot with. So he stuck with it, just trying everything until he came to these, how much do you pay for rent? Can I see your apartment type videos? And then once he got there, he was able to capitalize off his years of experience in the space to make it pop off even further. And that's why I believe that the way that what so many other people do, which is they bounce around to so many different things, that's why I believe that's flawed. Because if you stick with something long enough and you're smart enough to try it in a bunch of different ways, then you'll eventually be successful. And the longer you stick with something, also assuming you're putting yourself out there, so you know people know you, you have some top of mind awareness, that all compounds and it'll pop off. And when it pops off, it'll probably be really big and really fast. That's usually what happens. Caleb Simpson was persistent. That's again, consistency, not giving up. He was willing to ask for help. He was eager to ask for advice and mentorship. And Mr. Beast says the same thing. Mr. Beast is constantly calling people who know more than him about a specific topic and asking them everything they know. He wants to learn. Data is very important to him, extremely important. He, on several podcasts, emphasizes how important data is to him. And Caleb Simpson says the same thing. So I thought this was just a super inspiring story. There's so much to learn from this story. I learned so much researching this. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share it on my daily podcast. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. This is episode 247 of The Edward Show. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.